This is salt. Okay. Now, what does that have to do with Bitcoin? And I'll tell you what it has to do with Bitcoin. The British Empire was defeated by Indians under Mahatma Gandhi because they made their own salt. Back in 2009, the beginning of Bitcoin, it was the cypherpunks and everybody who was objecting to central bank authoritarianism who got together and said, we're going to make our own money. We're going to make our own money. It's called Bitcoin, and it's passive resistance, and it's going to topple the central bank empire, the central banks around the world. I predict, one of my predictions will be one of the major central banks in the world will collapse in 2021. They're highly leveraged. As your guest, Jim Rickards, points out many times, these banks are leveraged 50, 60, 70 to 1. They're leveraged more than long-term capital management was when long-term capital management was at its highest point of leverage. And one of them is going to collapse in 2021, and that will start an avalanche out of fiat money and paper money, and the top beneficiary of that will be Bitcoin. That's one of the catalysts for price appreciation in 2021. But my point is this, Daniela, Bitcoin is a protest against fiat money, central banks, authoritarianism. And the way the protest works is the cypherpunks and everyone involved in Bitcoin, essentially, we made our own money. It's perfect money. It has nothing to do with the state. You've separated for the first time in history, state from money. It's never been done before, ever. And now it has been finished. It has been completed. It has been figured out, and it's been launched, and it's out there for 10, 11 years, and it's working. And the nation state, as we know it, is going to dissolve. Central banks are going to dissolve, and fiat money is going to go the way of all fiat money has gone over 300 years. Not a single fiat money, paper money scheme has lasted over the past 300 years. They've all gone to zero or lost 99% of their purchase power. So it should be no shock to anyone that the US dollar is going to go to zero. The British pound looks particularly horrible. That's definitely going to go to zero. All the fiat money is going to go to zero. And of course, the chief beneficiary of that would be Bitcoin. And these are the catalysts. These are the catalysts to see this price projection, and why, when we get into the numbers, you'll understand more why I have the number that I have. Well, it's a magical kind of metamorphosis that turns greed into altruism. Bitcoin attracts a lot of greedy people who want to make money trading on Bitcoin, but as they're defunding central banks, and they're defunding fiat money, and they're defunding the nation state. So it's a very interesting technology that turns greed into the hardest money ever known in the human history. So the greedy folks, we need the greedy folks. People come for the greed, they stay for the revolution. And probably the one asset in the world now that's undervalued, that's not even very close to getting into a valuation that it should be commensurate with the rest of the markets, would be Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the cheapest asset in the world you can buy. As Paul Tudor Jones has said, it's the fastest horse in the race. It's demonstrably, provably not a Ponzi scheme. As a matter of fact, it's a reverse Ponzi scheme. In a Ponzi scheme, the base of the Ponzi scheme has to constantly get wider and bigger. The new money has to keep coming in to pay the investors off who have gotten into the Ponzi scheme early. That's a Ponzi scheme. As Charles Ponzi created the Ponzi scheme, look at Bernie Madoff was running a bit of a Ponzi scheme in that he was paying off investor returns with the new money coming in. Now let's look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is actually the opposite. Every 4 years, the amount of money that's mined on a daily basis shrinks by 50% in what's called the halving. So we started off with 50 coins per distribution on the mining output per 10 minutes. And then we had a halving down to 25, and then a halving down to 12.5, and a halving down to 6.25. So actually, it's a reverse Ponzi scheme. The amount of money that's entering the system is shrinking, not expanding. So that's a very simple point. And anyone who calls it a Ponzi scheme, A, doesn't know what a Ponzi scheme is, and B, has never looked at Bitcoin for more than 5 seconds, or just accepted like a Nouriel Rubini tweet as if that has meaning. But he's never looked at it either. So that's demonstrably, provably wrong. So what Bitcoin has for it is that it's a savings technology, the best savings technology ever invented, the best hard money that's ever been invented. And humans have a real need for hard money to do trade. Humans like to trade and they want hard money. That's what, over the thousands of years, gold kind of evolved to be a great way to trade in something that had store of value, so that I accepted your gold today for goods and services. I could respend that gold in the future. And you couldn't do that so well with beads and shells or, different things that have been tried for money for many years. And gold was doing a pretty good job for a long time. Then Bitcoin came around and it's doing a better job than gold because it's scarcer than gold. So it's harder than gold. It's absolute scarcity of 21 million coins. Gold is inflating at, let's say, 2% a year. And we know that if the price of gold goes up, the technology to find more gold will also increase. So that number could go 3, 4, 5, 6% a year, just like we saw in the energy markets. It's not, the gold supply is elastic. It's not inelastic. It's not finite. It's elastic. So that's a problem. It's unconfiscatable. When I was saying Bitcoin, you cannot confiscate Bitcoin. You cannot censor Bitcoin. It's portable, more portable than gold. It's more divisible than gold. So it's on every single key point that you like gold, Bitcoin does a better job. It's hard money and it's a store of value. That's its primary purpose. That's its number one goal. Why is it going up in price? Is because we live in a world of hundreds of trillions and quadrillion of fiat money that is destroying people's lives, destroying economies, creating wealth and income gaps that are creating social unrest, and it feeds malfeasance. Every time the U.S. government makes a stupid mistake, they paper it over by printing more money. Same thing with all these other G20 countries. Since 1971, since we went off the gold standard. If you make a mistake, you make a blunder with your policy, just paper it over with more printed money. By the way, does that create more cantillionaires at the top who then control more of government, and the corruption goes wider, and the people at the bottom are getting poorer and the purchasing power is weakening? Yes, it does. But tell that to the people who are printing the money and putting it into their pocket. They don't care. First of all, there's nothing the government can do to stop Bitcoin. So there's no way to regulate Bitcoin. And that's what the governments are finding out. They would love to regulate it and they would love to stop it. But so far they've been unsuccessful because the computational power that runs Bitcoin, running at about 160 quintillion calculations per second, is beyond the reach of any government or any group of governments. So it's achieved escape velocity. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, if governments really wanted to, they may have been able to thwart Bitcoin. But now it's too late. It's simply the escape velocity has been achieved, and there's nothing any government can do. The corrections in Bitcoin have been successfully getting less and less and less. I mean, I've went through 3 80 to 90% corrections, in Bitcoin since 2011. So we just experienced a 20% correction. And so now that correction's over, and now we start going higher. And so it'll start to behave more like an asset class where you might see 10 to 20% corrections. The 30, 40, 50% corrections, I think, we're past that because the size of the market's gotten to be a lot bigger, and the amount of money on the sidelines waiting to get in is enormous. Bitcoin is not right or left. It's on its own vector. It's on its own path. And it, as I said, it disintermediates the nation state. So you don't need politicians. You just have the hardest money asset in the world, and you're free to trade with anybody. And this is the thing, fiat money promotes war. Paul Krugman over at the New York Times said that the US dollar is backed with men with guns. He admitted in the New York Times that the US dollar fosters violence, it's backed by violence, it's terrorism in a little slip of paper. The US dollar is a terrorist note. It's essentially backed by financial terrorism. Whereas Bitcoin is peace. So if I want to get some Bitcoin from you, I have to offer you something that you're willing to take and trade for Bitcoin. So there's no coercion because it's unconfiscatable. I cannot confiscate or coerce the Bitcoin out of you. So I can only get it through peaceful trade. So that hopefully appeals to the angels of our better nature, us as humans, and we move away from this violence and the paper money and the fiat money and the U.S. foreign policy and the politicians that love violence. They live on violence. We don't want that anymore. We want peace. We want Bitcoin.
Okay.